Congrats on making it this far. In this final part, we'll be focusing on presenting your work for a portfolio and that all-important lighting to look professional. At this stage, I always work in a new blend file with all procedural textures baked down into PBR maps and all meshes removed and cleaned up of any external images such as masks. To do this, go to the display mode in the navigator window and change it over to Blender file. Here you've got access to all the images that are used in the scene as well as all the meshes and other objects. Under images, you can see I've already cleaned this up. So I've just got the 4 maps for the cart, the 4 maps for the ore, and then the one image which is for the HDRI that I use as the default lighting. Once you've cleaned them all up, you can change this back to view layer, and we can go from there. So prior to baking the textures down, I wasn't quite happy with the gold ore, so I boosted the brightness and saturation a little bit and strengthened the metallic map. This was just a case of adding a hue saturation node to the albedo and a color ramp to the metallic. And then once that was done, I rebaked them down. When I started this project, I planned for the tracks to sit part sunk into some ballast or gravel. So I'm going to make a circular piece for the ground and then displace it with a photo texture. It's not always necessary to create everything from scratch, especially when it's just for presentation purposes. So we can start off by adding in a cylinder. And I'm going to increase the vertices to 64, make the radius 2, and then just move it up 1 meter on the Z-axis. Next, in edit mode, I'm going to select the top face and grow the selection, delete and then select the bottom face, and then flip the normals with Alt-N. Next, in face mode, I'm just going to inset that and delete the center part, and then use a grid fill. And then just in top view, just use the offset function just to make sure that it's aligned to the world axis. The reason I'm doing this is because we're going to use displacement, and I want a nice evenly subdivided mesh. Over on ambient CG, I'm going to download a gravel texture. Quite like the look of this one, and I'm going to be using the 2K PNG version. So I'll download that, and I'll see you back in Blender. Over in here, we're going to split the view into a shader editor. Press N to turn off the side panel and add a new material. With the principal BSDF selected, press Ctrl-Shift-T, and you'll get access to the open dialog, and you can import all of the textures already set up. Now, it doesn't look quite right, as you can see, and that's because we're in UV mode and we haven't unwrapped this cylinder. So I'm just going to select everything, press U, and unwrap. And you can see it's much more even. Next, we're going to add a mix shader between the ambient occlusion and the diffuse. And you can see as I increase the factor, it adds that shadow in between the pebbles. And you can see the displacement's not actually doing anything at the moment, it's completely flat. The reason for that is there's not actually enough geometry there, and it's not turned on. So I'm going to go over to render settings and change it to experimental. Next, I'm going to add in a subdivision surface modifier with Ctrl-2 and turn on adaptive subdivision. Next, under the material panel, we're going to scroll down to settings and change the displacement from bump only to displacement and bump. And you'll see that this makes a rather strong effect, so we need to turn down the scale. And I'm just holding Shift to make it a slightly more gradual adjustment. We still want it to displace a little bit, just so we can see it sort of climbing up over the sleepers. It's sort of doing it a little bit. I don't want any gaps underneath the sleepers ideally either, so I might need to turn it up just a little bit. But not so much that you can see lots of stretching in the texture. Okay, that looks all right. Next, I'm just going to move it up slightly on the Z-axis. GZ. Next, I want a sort of border to go around this, so I'm just going to turn on the overlays. And in edit mode, I'm just going to select the edge of this cylinder. Shift D to duplicate, right click to cancel the selection, and then P to separate by selection. Out of edit mode, I'm going to select that new object and convert it to a curve object. Over in the bevel part of this, we can then increase the depth And if we change the resolution, just going to go back to solid view, change the resolution to 0, this gives us a 4-sided thing, and if we add 2 it will give us an 8-sided. And then I'm just going to convert that back to a mesh. Double click this loop and select ring, and then I'm going to use checker set deselect, which I've got set to the quick favorites menu, and just offset that by 1 and use smart loop and then delete those edges, and that gives us a nice even box frame around the whole thing. Next I'm going to select this loop here and do a quick origin to the bottom, and then snap that to the 3D cursor. Now this whole frame is sitting on the world 0 axis. Turn off the overlays again because we don't need the outlines. Not worried about underneath for this. Next I want to add some sort of material. Oh sorry, there's a piece of the gravel texture just poking through, so I'm just going to raise that up slightly on the Z-axis. It's not super important, but it's just irritating me, so I'm just going to get rid of that. And I'm just going to add in the auto smooth modifier just so we can't see the faceting on the sides. Back in rendered view, I'm going to add a new material and just make this a sort of brown colour, just so it looks like a wooden frame of some sort. Just going to add in a bevel shader just so the edges catch highlights and it doesn't look quite so 3D. And just drop the radius down slightly. Back to the material for the rubble, I just want to drop the brightness slightly because it's very white at the moment, so I'm just going to take some of the brightness down and then drop the contrast slightly as well, just so it's a more even sort of greyish white. And next we're going to look at some lighting. So the first thing I'm going to do is add in an area light and place that directly above where the ore is. You can see it lighting up on the rendered view on the left there, and then I'm just going to scale this slightly smaller than the edges of the crate, just so it's focused more on the actual ore itself. And I just want to adjust this so that it's got a sort of an orange hue to it. And I just find that it helps it look more like gold, so that it looks more like something quite vibrant mined out of the earth rather than just a sort of flat yellow colour that it was. I'm just going to turn the power on this up to 15 watts, just so that it gets a subtle orange glow. And we do still have the HDRI at full strength, so we can just turn that down a little bit as well, just for a better effect. Turn that down to 0, you can see that that orange light is just working on the gold on the ore there. I'm going to put that at about 0.4, seems to work well. Next, I'm going to start working on a 3-point lighting setup. You've probably heard of these already because they're not new. And I'm just going to use 3 area lights. The first one is going to be a key light, which is going to be lighting up the majority of what you can see from this angle. Just go into the light settings, and I'm just going to crank the power on this up. I'm just going to turn the HDRI off for a moment, just while I fine tune this. And you don't have to be super precise with it. And you can adjust the spread as well, just in case you want sharper or softer shadow fall off. And I kind of want this light to very much focus on the cart and the track itself, as they are the focal point. I don't want this to contribute too much to the lighting on the ore or the frame, for example. Just going to move it away, and I'm just using normal move commands such as ZZ to move it on its local Z axis. That's quite good from that angle. It's lighting up a fair amount of the front of it. And scale it slightly as well if we want it to cover more of the ground. But we are going to be bringing the HDRI back in just to light up anything that's missed by this 3-point setup. Next, I'm going to duplicate the area light and snap it back to where it was, and change the pivot over to the 3D cursor, and then just rotate it around the Z axis so that I can get it lit from the other side. And this is going to be the fill light. So the point of this light is to fill in the areas that the key light isn't quite doing a great job of lighting up. And this can be a much bigger light, and it will usually be lower power than the main light as well. So I'm going to drop that down to about 30. Doesn't have to be exact, and the spread as well. I'm going to drop that down to the teens, sort of 17, 18, something like that. If I turn that off, you could the fill light off, you can see what that's doing. With this, I'm going to give it a little bit of a tint towards the blue. So I'm just going to put a little bit of saturation on and then shift the hue around. So we've got blue coming in from the side, and we're also going to be using another one of these lights at the back for a rim light, and that's going to be that one's going to have a slightly orange hue to it. We can go quite big with the fill light, and again just Shift D to duplicate, change to the 3D cursor, and rotate that round to the back. And you can already see that light is reflecting on the railway sleepers at the back there. We just need to fine tune the position of it. When it's sort of up high and then angled down sort of 45 degrees, because that's the reverse angle that we're looking at from the camera view currently. And one thing you can do afterwards is, once you've set up your 3-point lighting, you can parent them all to say an empty and rotate them all around the model. As you're taking your renders for your portfolio, you can move the whole lighting setup around so that you can get the best lighting for each bit that you're taking a render of. Say you're doing a close-up of the handle or the oar or the railway pins that hold the rails to the sleepers, you can get the lighting just spot on just by moving the all of the lights around in one go. For this rim light, I'm just going to shift the hue towards the orange. Just it's got a sort of warmish colour. And the contrast between the cool colours and the warm colours gives not an illusion of depth, because there's depth there because it's a 3D model, but it helps bring some contrast to it so that it reads better for the eye. You can go in as well and turn each of these lights off and on individually and see what they're all doing. And with them all on, you can see it's quite a well-lit model. And I'm just going to bring the HDRI back in at 0.4. And at this point, it's just a case of fine-tuning what you want it to look like. There used to be a rule of thumb, I don't know how accurate it is, that you want your the power of all your lights to add up to 1, or in this case it would be 100. So you might have one at 50, one at 30, and one at 20. Obviously that doesn't include the HDRI though, so take that with a pinch of salt. And I'm just going to change the key light over to a sort of slightly yellow colour, just to give it a bit more warmth. And I might drop the HDRI down another 2, just to see what that looks like. Looking around the model, it looks quite good. It looks fairly evenly lit. I've got some strong shadows in the back, and it reads quite well. You can go through and rename all these lights if you want to, just to make it easier to tell them apart. So this one is the key light, this one the fill light, just using F2 to bring up the rename dialog, and this one the rim light. And as you turn them on and off, you can see how they're individually contributing to the whole thing. And if one isn't contributing, you can move it and adjust it so that you can make sure that everything is being influenced by it to a degree. Obviously, we're only looking from one camera angle here as well, but when you take your renders, you can look at it from all sorts of different angles. Next, I'm just going to show you quickly how to set up a camera for a turntable. So I've added a camera and cleared the transforms, moved it back on the y-axis, rotate it 90 on the x-axis, and then in the rendered view, press 0 to change to the camera view. Then moved it up on the z-axis and angled it down on the x. You can then use GZZ to move the camera further away. And I'm going to add in an empty and scale it up to about 3 meters. And then I'm going to parent the camera to the empty. You can then use the empty to rotate the camera all the way around the model. And you can use this to produce like a turntable animation. I like to start usually at around a 45-degree angle, and then it's just a case of setting up the timings for the animation. I rendered this as a PNG sequence and used Blender's video sequencer to add a background. That's it. I hope this series has been helpful. If anything was unclear, drop me a comment and I'll get back to you. If you're enjoying the content, please like and subscribe. It really helps, as making these videos takes a lot of time. Thanks for watching and take care.